And welcome back to the Wolverine Live. This is John Borton. We've got a fun one for you here tonight. I'll tell you right off the bat, because we've got a pair of my personal favorites in the house. You know, Tom Crawford is here every week, and Tom is of great fame in Press Pass that you can see on Fox 47. He's got his own podcasting network. He comes up with all kinds of creative things. And tonight, special guest, Clayton Sayfie, off the staff of the Wolverine. And he does his own thing on podcasts and different areas, and some great research, and kills it on the website. And now he's with us tonight. Welcome, gentlemen.
Great to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's great to be back, JB. Sorry I missed last week with Wayman Britt, but I conquered the old COVID thing that I didn't think I was ever going to have to deal with. Now, I will never take my health for granted ever again, okay? I'm making that statement right now.
I hear you. And we were, we were concerned, and very glad that you are back with us. Certainly, if you're gonna tap out for a week and send a sub in, Wayman Britt's not a bad guy to step in there. And I will say this too, Wayman kind of let him have it, the basketball team a week ago, and I think they hurt him, because then they reeled off 2 straight wins. So he might be going into the locker room sometime before these next 2 games, which they have to have. So anyway, great to have Tom Crawford back with us. A lot of fun having Clayton Sayfie with us, because I haven't been able to do this before, but I have been looking forward to this one. I want to throw this out to you two gentlemen right off the bat. A week ago, I said to Wayman Britt, do you think this season is salvageable for Michigan? And Wayman Britt's kind of an upfront, blunt guy, and he said, no, I don't think so. And then he went on to at great length to explain why. My question this week, after a couple of wins, is do you fellas think that Michigan's recent success means it is able to claw its way back onto the bubble for the NCAA tournament? Clayton, we'll start with you on this one.
JB, you took some of the words I was going to say. I listened last week to Wayman Britt. I thought it was fantastic. And I was going to say, did Kobe Buffkin listen to that episode too? Because one of the things I took most away from your conversation with Wayman, who the Defensive Player of the Year award at Michigan is named after, was they don't really have that guy that brings the fire, right? That leadership that they need to kind of galvanize the team. And they don't really have that guy that takes total pride in their defense. I feel like Kobe Buffkin has tried to be that guy at different points this season. He has made a ton of progress. He's gotten better. He's had some great games, but his last 2 games have been spectacular. They've been as good as you could imagine from a kid who is still the youngest scholarship player on this team. And he talked about it after the game on Sunday against Ohio State, that he's trying to lead by example and show the other guys that, how it's supposed to be done. He was saying that Jet Howard, he gets into him a little bit at times, but he also encourages him, because he said, hey, I've been there. I was that guy last year that couldn't stay on the floor because of defense. So it just feels like his emergence is coming at the right time. This is a huge week, as you said. This is going to determine Nebraska and Indiana if you are going to be on the bubble going forward. They're not in that conversation yet, but they can be with 2 more wins in a row.
All right, good deal. Tom, thoughts?
Well, I'm a little surprised with Wayman saying it's not tangible, because he's a positive guy, but he's a fire and brimstone guy, and he saw Kobe in Grand Rapids. That's where he lives, and he as indicate we talked about the Defensive Player of the Year award. That the award named after him. I mean, that's Wayman was a stopper. He held Adrian Dantley to 1 point in the NCAA Sweet 16, so that's why it really hurts him, because his teams in the mid-70s, when I was in school, they pushed the ball and they defended. And that's what was not happening with this team. But we saw that fire, and that Clay just mentioned about, where's that? It finally came from Kobe. And I truly think when you have 4 potential quad 1 wins ahead of them, and you're at 8 Big Ten wins right now, I truly believe if you get to 12 wins, going to Chicago, going to United Center for the Big Ten tournament, I think they're in. I think they're in because the body of work in front of them, as daunting as it is, it's a strength to Michigan right now because it can make up for lost equity, and it's all there in front of them. And as Clayton mentioned about this Nebraska game, that's a gimme. But I mean, if they beat Indiana, they're in the hunt. They're in the hunt. And then they could get a split in the next 2 with Rutgers on the road and Michigan State at home. They're in great shape.
Okay. No taking Nebraska for granted. I just
no, I don't want to do that. Well, they just beat Penn State. Look what they did at Penn State.
Exactly. And I told mutual friend Jamie Morris just a little bit ago that if you want to play that game the way it should be played, then tomorrow morning, before the Nebraska game, you play the Central Michigan tape and say, hey, fellas, you think that this is going to be an easy win? I got a movie to show you. And the other thing about it is, we talked at length, and Clayton did a nice job talking at length about Kobe Buffkin. I have noticed that in these last couple of games, I think there's been a better version of Hunter Dickinson on the floor. I think that they've helped him out and gotten him the ball in some different places, and that he has been more assertive, more aggressive, even through some double teams in that last game. I don't think that this is a guy that should be trying to bull his way through double teams all the time, but at the same time, he can't catch in the post, and just because there's a double team, immediately fling it over his head back out to the perimeter. And he wasn't doing that. And he was picking his spots. At times, you had an open guy and they're hitting the shots, but at the same time, he was moving around and they were hitting him in different places and able to score that way. This is a guy that, to me, has to absolutely be the leader of this team down the stretch. You might have a little more fire at times from Kobe, but as far as the go-to guy, that better be Hunter Dickinson, because he's the biggest guy on the floor. He's your leading scorer. He's got to be somebody that really takes charge. So I think that has been a difference in addition to what Clayton said about Kobe. Tom Crawford, how about you? What have you noticed that has been different? And Tom first, and then Clayton, you can jump in after that with anything beyond Kobe that you have noticed is different in this team.
Well, I want to go back to Hunter again and get a shot at that as well, because, and I being ill last week, I didn't go down to Chrysler, so I had the privilege of watching Jay Wright do the analyst role with CBS, and he does a terrific job. And I understand he had a great conversation with Juwan surrounding that game that he broadcast for CBS, and he talked about how Hunter is basically a more dominant player in the right block versus the left block. You say down the block is blocks. There's 2 blocks to choose from down there, and if you look at these possessions, Hunter is much more effective on the right block, where he can, with that left hook, he can kind of saunter inside, going left to right, and the lane, and get that soft hook. And I mean, that's a huge difference. And this is what I don't really know about the decision making of where he sets up. Is there a particular play? I mean, that's when I'm getting down to that pressure. I'm going to ask Juwan that question. Is how are these set plays, or is that his own discretion? Because I truly believe, like you mentioned, JB, that he has to be more of a dagger offensively, a mentality. Terry Mills talked about that when we had him on. He's got to be, that he always talked about this Viper mentality that he and Joey Baker have to have consistently. And I truly believe that. So if he can be more consistent on that, and then the Doug McDaniel thing that's going to be that's the X factor the rest of the way, guys. I mean, and that's asking a lot of that young man, but he's got some huge games ahead of him.
All right, Clayton, jump in there.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I think part of Hunter getting in some of those better positions has been something that Phil Martelli talked about a week ago. He said we got to play with some better pace. They were playing too slow. He thought they were getting in their action too late. And I think we saw them really push it against Northwestern, which I thought was smart because Northwestern was playing their 5th game in 11 days. They seemed to be a little bit flat last Thursday night. And then Ohio State, you saw it too. Them, it's not always the fast break stuff, but it's Doug McDaniel getting down the floor quickly or getting an outlet pass out to somebody else. We saw Joey Baker capitalize on a 3 with that. But when they get down quicker, I think Hunter Dickinson's able to get deeper in the post, and that really helped against Ohio State. I mean, how many times did he catch it where he was, just within range to put up that lefty hook, and he abused Akpera from the freshman from Ohio State early in the second half. I think Zed Key's a little banged up, but still a questionable decision to go with him there. He had 8 points on him in 7 minutes. But, so I think the pace is helping him too. And then, I mean, Tom, you saying Doug McDaniel, it's to me, Hunter plays his best too when Doug McDaniel, Kobe Buffkin, and Jet Howard are playing their best as well, because it all kind of feeds on itself. I mean, if they can sell out and use every resource on Hunter Dickinson like Penn State did, holding him to 6 points, then it's going to be pretty easy if nobody else is making him pay. But if those guys are hitting shots, you can't bring everybody on Hunter, and it's kind of one of those things that works all together. So that, I think, when we've seen that over the last 2 games too, where the guards have played well, Hunter has played well. And when they're clicking, I mean, this offense especially, I know they've beat up a little bit better, but the offense especially is dangerous as they come.
All right, staying with Clayton for a minute. Jet Howard, you mentioned in passing, and what I want to know from both of you guys is simply this. He has had his struggles here over the last few weeks. I mean, he's had some unbelievable games, put him in position to win the Iowa game, should have won that. They would look a whole lot better if that win was on the resume. But they let that one slip away late. But Jet Howard, how is he going to be able to work his way back up to being a consistent, positive contributor to this team like he was in some early games? And if so, how do you think it will manifest itself? Like I say, Clayton, you go first.
One thing I think, to me, he still doesn't look totally 100% to me coming off of the ankle injury. He seems a little bit slower. And, I think that'll, time will only help with that. Maybe he'll be even healthier tomorrow night against Nebraska. So I think that's something that he kind of struggled with against Northwestern. Now, great move by Juwan Howard to pull him and put in Joey Baker early in that second half. And then I think he had 9 points after halftime. He had the huge and 1-3. But I think that one, that'll help Jet getting a little bit healthier. 2, I think he easily can, help this team offensively. We've kind of seen that, and it is annoying at times, some of his shot selection, but I thought against Ohio State he picked his spots a little bit better, and maybe Juwan taking him out at times and throwing Joey Baker in there, who's been pretty reliable lately, will kind of teach him a little bit more of hey, there is another guy we could throw in here, because at times this year when Jet has a mistake on defense or takes a bad shot, it feels like they don't have somebody they could go to replace him. But I think Jet is going to be fine on offense. I just worry about who he's matched up with defensively.
Right. Tom?
Well, I worry about defensively, like Clayton mentioned, but also sometimes early in the shot clock, Jet lets it fly. No pun intended. And it seems like when he's a little bit more, I mean, where they're like 6-7 seconds into the shot clock, and that sucker is going up. Now, a lot of times if it's at the top of the key, that dude, that's his shot. But sometimes elbow extended, it's not there. I think he's a little impatient in that regard. And so that frustrates me. But I do think I agree with Clayton about the injury. I think I keep telling myself he's just coming. That was a bad ankle sprain he had. The Howard that I have most in problem with is Chase Howard, because I don't understand why Will Cheddar is not getting those minutes. And maybe you guys know something that I don't know. But I mean, he's getting too many minutes oftentimes when it's 4 fouls and maybe a rebound. Now, sometimes he makes a play, and he's had some great minutes here and there. But it mystifies me how Will Cheddar is not the guy, because when Will Cheddar gets on that court, the energy for the other four dudes rises like instantly. I mean, you look at the body language of the other players who are on the court at the same time. So I'm curious to wonder. I'm wondering why in the Ohio State game that Cheddar didn't play, and if there's an injury or something like that. And I hope that changes, because I think Will Cheddar has more upside than Jace Howard does.
Cheddar, I believe, has had some illness issues.
Okay.
Clayton, you can speak to that too.
Yeah, so I guess he got sick before the Northwestern game and actually went into the locker room and puked mid-game, and so he wasn't available there. But I did ask about him to Tom Wyrot on Sunday, and he said that Will was available and that he's pretty much over it. I think it was more of a food poisoning thing. So I'm with you. You know, I'm a Will Cheddar fan. I think that when he comes in, he adds a lot. I do wonder maybe with some of those minutes, especially in the first half, what Juwan is looking for when they come in and they kind of bring some pressure defense. Maybe he's thinking that if that's going to be the role of who's coming in off the bench to bring that energy, it's Jace. But and maybe you just want a perimeter-oriented defender out there. But that's my only thought, because Will Cheddar, his minutes have been really good this year outside of some fouls, you know. But Jace does that too, you know. Jace is known to foul. So, it's a little bit confusing. The rotation seems to vary quite a bit, and I get you got to mix it up situationally, but it seems a little bit odd that he plays 10 minutes one game and then, you know, is a healthy scratch the next. Yeah.
Well, he didn't play against Ohio State at all in that
right.
game. It meant mystified. And if you're clarifying that he was available, that Tom Wyrot indicated, then I hope that changes. I assume he's going to play a lot more tomorrow night against the Huskies.
They did go with the starters. I think everyone was 30 plus.
Oh, 30 plus. Wow. What do you think about that?
Hunter played, I think, 36, right?
Yeah. Now I'm curious to know that. I mean, you look at those minutes, that was a different allocation.
Yes.
And maybe that was a good thing. Some teams do that, shorten the benches when it gets to.
Yeah, it's that time of year, right?
It's getting that time of year. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking. And speaking of that time of year, it's that time in Michigan season where it faces a week where it can do one of two things: either build on this mini momentum it's built up over the last 2 wins, or else it can take a step back. Nebraska tomorrow night, and then Indiana this weekend. In my opinion, I think this thing is a situation where Michigan has to get both of these. If it does not, then, you know, you have at the very least taken a gut punch to the momentum that you have built up. And, you know, you're running out of chances. If you look at the rest of the schedule, you're running out of chances. After these home games, I would say there is not a single game left where Michigan can look at it and say, you know what, we should win. That doesn't mean they're not going to get more wins. I think they will. But just looking at it and say, okay, well, that's a win. You can't, it's dangerous ground anyway, but the road games they've got, you know, okay, there we've got it right there. You got Nebraska and Indiana this week, and then you got to go to the Kohl Center in Wisconsin, Michigan State. That'll be a very fiery game in Chrysler. At Rutgers, no bargain at all. Wisconsin at home. Finish with at Illinois, at Indiana. There are no bargains in there to be had. Tom Crawford, how do you feel about the immensity of this particular week for them?
Well, you know, I'm stuck in the metric thing, so they got 3 mulligans in my mind. They got 3 losses. They got to get the 12 wins. That means 8 losses. They're at 5 losses. So they got to win 4. They got to go 4-3. I mean, I'm a bottom line kind of guy, and it's a bottom line business. I mean, I agree with you on the Indiana game. That is a must-win game, and you're talking about a team that just knocked out the number 1 team in the nation, and you know, it's Trace Jackson Davis is going to be a handful. It's going to be and they got some young freshmen that are kicking it in right now. So Indiana's going to be tough. But if you lose that game, then you got to go to the rack and win. Okay, you're going to go to the rack and Piscataway and win that. That ain't happening. Yeah, I mean, Michigan's offense struggles against average defensive teams. I mean, Rutgers just suffocates you. So, I mean, that's a loss. I would be shocked if Michigan went to the rack on the 23rd of February and won that game. So, I mean, you look at games that are obvious losses. I mean, Rutgers on the road, Illinois on the road, and Indiana on the road. Those are your 3 losses. You got to win the rest of them. I mean, that's the way I'm looking at the slate realistically. And if you screw one up, you're going to have to steal one. And I guess maybe Champaign on the 2nd of March might be the best shot at that. But it's daunting.
All right, Clayton, response to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a super important week. I'm always a little bit hesitant when we talk about must win or need to do this, but I look at these next 4 and I say you got to win 3 out of 4. And then that Wisconsin game looks pretty good at home there later on in the season. And then if you could steal one on the road, I think that's that one time that you were talking about earlier. If you were able to do what I'm saying here, hold serve, and then steal one, it doesn't look likely, Rutgers, Illinois, Indiana on the road. But if you do, it didn't look likely either when they went to Ohio State last year and won without Hunter Dickinson. But if you can steal one of those, then you go to Chicago and you think, okay, we feel pretty good here about our chances. But to me, Nebraska, you have to win. That was a loss that they almost lost last year to Nebraska. That would have did them in at home. And then, so you can't lose that. I think it'd be a quad 3 loss. And then, Indiana at Wisconsin doesn't look as tough. Teams are going there right now and winning. But if you lose to Indiana, you got to win that one. So I look at these 4 as the 4 games that are going to set you up for what the next 4 would do. And that would be, get that marquee win that you need potentially on the road to then put you in position heading into the Big Ten tournament. So maybe it was a cop out of an answer just because I'm not a must win fan of that term, but that's kind of how I see it. It's probably the most important week easily of the season and one of the most important weeks you can have because it's the difference between staying afloat, staying in the conversation, or basically being done, especially if you lose to Nebraska.
Yeah, that's good stuff there. I'm not a must-win guy either. I usually stiff arm those sorts of things, and yet, boy, get the repelling ropes to climb out of the hole you dig if you don't win and don't sweep this week.
It's as close as you can get to a must-win, I think. In the regular season in early February,
Yeah,
that's how.
No doubt about it. We know that Juwan Howard promotes a growth mindset for his team, and he is talking about having a growth mindset for himself because Tom, I believe it was you that mentioned Jay Wright on the call on the analysis in Michigan. And Juwan Howard had a little sit down to talk with Jay Wright and talk about his approach to coaching and the former Villanova coach. What was your reaction when you heard that Juwan did it and characterized it as an opportunity to continue to learn and change what he's doing?
Well, I mean, it didn't surprise me at all. I mean, this is a guy that eliminated him in the Sweet 16 last year, if I'm not mistaken. Nova took him out. One thing I think one of Juwan Howard's greatest strengths is his willingness to look at his shortcomings, his strengths, his weaknesses, his core competencies, and have a clear-cut evaluation of it. I mean, he's coming from the NBA environment. This whole college thing is new. He brought on Phil Martelli for multiple reasons. One of them was a huge college Hall of Fame legendary intel that Phil brings. And Jay Wright is as bright as you can be. I mean, and look what his resume has dictated. So, I mean, Juwan is one who takes advantages of situations for his own personal development, which develops his team. And so it didn't surprise me. I commend him for it. And I think you're going to see a lot more of it moving forward.
Clayton, I believe you wrote about that. Your thoughts on that whole interaction?
Yeah, Juwan talked about it on his radio show last night and kind of revealed that nugget, and I thought that was pretty cool. Coaches use a ton of coach speak. Juwan Howard engages in that quite a bit at times. He always talks about all hands on deck and, this player's day to day. Even, he doesn't give much information at times. But the one thing that's not coach speak is when he talks about the growth mindset that you mentioned. It's something I think he mentioned at his introductory press conference when he got hired in 2019. And, he was talking about how, hey, I've been meeting with John Beilein almost every summer for years to talk about coaching because he was kind of, coming up in the business. And so to me, it just shows you that he's practicing what he preaches. He talks about that with his team too, that he wants that growth mindset. And Tom, I agree with you. He's kind of able to look at and self-evaluate himself and his team. Sometimes he's up there and I think he said a couple of weeks ago, yeah, I'm damn pleased with this team. We're second in the Big Ten, but deep down, he wants to have, probably had some of those opportunities back that they lost. So, he's a guy that's kind of keeps it real. And, I think this was a good example of that.
Yeah. And here's one pet peeve I have to an extent, and that is those who I get that the coach that preceded Juwan Howard was a coaching legend. I labeled him as probably before most as the best basketball coach in Michigan basketball history. But when I hear if something's going wrong for a stretch or something is not being done, it's, you get the, I wish John Beilein was back or this or that. And what I think people don't fully grasp or don't care about, because granted, and I'll grant you this, it's a bottom line business. You had a John Beilein at the very zenith of his career at Michigan, and 40 some years into coaching, you've got Juwan Howard, who is a handful of years into a college basketball coaching career, not even that. And so I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I just think that sometimes the comparisons we make are a little bit too much.
Oh, I agree. That's apples to oranges. They're different styles. That Juwan brings a different strength than John Beilein does, and Juwan's had some hiccups here. He's had some on-court issues that he's overcome, and that he's looked at himself and John Beilein never ran into that situation before, so I agree with you. It's still early in the game for Juwan Howard. I think this next year, though, is really going to be compelling to see. Last year was a struggle for a while. About a year ago, we were having these same kind of conversations the three of us are having right now, if you recall. Remember that Iowa game? How bad they looked at Iowa at Chrysler. Oh my God, they're not going to get in the tournament, and they wiggled their way in, and they got in the Sweet 16 again for the fifth time in program history. That's a great run for the program. But as far as next year, I think that's really going to be telling, because that's far into the work resume as far as this Michigan stop and the collegiate level, and we're going to have a pretty good gauge of where it's headed and how the season ends and how it begins next year.
I also remember a few years back, you're mentioning, last year, but I remember a few years back after a loss to Ohio State and things spinning out of control. I remember a conversation on the phone with one time, Crawford, and we were discussing about whether or not John Beilein was going to make it.
Yes.
And
they did? And then 2 days later, they absolutely hammered Michigan State by like 30-some points. And all's well in the world then. That's
no doubt.
The figure of college basketball, right?
No doubt. Yeah, absolutely. Clayton, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. We're going to football. And we have seen that one Chris Partridge is headed back to town. The fact that he is rejoining the Michigan staff by all accounts, is one that I think really grabs Michigan fans' attention on a number of fronts, from recruiting to his coaching ability to the relationships he strikes with players. Your thoughts on what this impending addition is going to give to Jim Harbaugh and his staff going forward?
Well, first of all, we don't know exactly what his role is going to be, which I find really interesting because you have a full coaching staff right now with 10 on-field assistant coaches. Now everyone's kind of waiting for the shoe to drop. Is it going to be George Hilo? Is it going to be Jay Harbaugh or something like that? Just because those are the positions that Chris Partridge coached while he was here. So that'll be interesting, to see what kind of role, what kind of title he has. But I think people are pretty excited about this because of what Chris Partridge did during his time here. I mean, he came in, Jim Harbaugh hires him from Paramus Catholic. He's the director of player personnel, but then he quickly moves to an on-field role a year later and became an ace recruiter for Michigan, going all around the country. I mean, it wasn't just guys from New Jersey where he has strong ties. If you look at some of the big names he pulled in, he was helping with guys all over the South, Florida, Georgia. He pulled 2 5-star defensive tackles out of Georgia, Aubrey Solomon and Chris Hinton. I mean, that's pretty unheard of. I know the careers didn't work out as, they probably didn't play like 5 stars here, especially Aubrey Solomon, and he moved on to Tennessee. But it's pretty rare to get an interior defensive lineman out of the South like that. So he's a fantastic recruiter. And then we'll see, what he is as a position coach back here. By all accounts, he did a good job and wanted to move up and coordinate a defense at Ole Miss where he got that opportunity. So I think it's a pretty big win for Michigan. I don't think Jim Harbaugh was looking necessarily to replace anybody. I think the timing will back me up there. The fact that it's less than 2 weeks until spring ball, but he saw that Chris Partridge is on the market, a guy that he trusts, a guy that's a good coach and a good recruiter, and he said, "Why not? Let's kind of make this work."
And Tom Crawford, Chris Partridge will be coming back to a very different Michigan situation than he left, because they were still looking for that breakthrough when he left. Now he's coming back to a team that has knocked off Ohio State 2 times in a row, that has won the Big Ten 2 times in a row. I mean, he's got to be feeling like he's coming back into a little bit of high clover.
Yeah, and I think as Clayton mentioned about the recruiting element, then when I think of Chris Partridge, I think of recruiting. I think of how good of recruiting they were. I mean, it was uncanny. Here they were top recruiting and they weren't winning Big Ten championships. Now they're winning back-to-back Big Ten championships, CFP appearances. They're like 19th overall in the rankings. So I think there was a need there. I mean, I would be shocked. I mean, George Hilo, I assume that's the guy. I don't know. I don't know what role he's going to play. I do know that Michigan's defense, that at the second level at linebacker, I think needs some help, and maybe that's an area that Jim Harbaugh wants to address. But I just think it's a great hire. I mean, he was down there working for Lane Kiffin. I don't know what the hell happened down there. I mean, it was at DC. I mean, that's pretty prominent, in the SEC. So maybe he'll bring some SEC influence, some SEC experiences back to the Big Ten that can help Michigan. Because always when you leave a program, get some other influences, bring it back, you can be better off and more valuable to your staff.
No doubt about it. I'm just going to stay with you for a minute, Tom. And obviously, we get to this time of the year, everybody's thinking basketball. And yet there are some people who never stop thinking football. Spring football is not that far away. If I were to give you one position that you will most have your eye on come spring football, which position will that be and why?
This might not sound too sexy, but and is there one guy that's playing this whole role? Tommy Dolman? I mean, who's going to be the punter? Who's going to be the place kicker? I mean, there's a huge void there, guys. I mean, when you're talking about Jake Moody, I mean, my word, I mean, is it one guy doing all those things? So I'm actually turning this into a question more than an answer. And before you answer that I'm still going to go back also to wide receiver, because that was a position of weakness, and where getting some more vertical front threat on those schemes and stretching that defense and using that incredible arm that JJ McCarthy has and get ramped up. Maybe Roman Wilson has that year, Derek Alexander, Anthony Carter. I don't know. But getting a better performance at wide receiver. But answer the question, guys. Who's the punter, the kicker, the kickoff guy? Help me out so I can sleep at night here in February.
I'm going to let our friend Clayton Safey take a shot at that one, as well as answering the question himself about position. But I will say, Tom, you have two guys that are very proud of you for that answer. Not only Jay Harbaugh, but Chris Partridge. They're big special teams minds, and that one, came right out of left field on me. I hadn't thought about it, but now I am thinking about it. Clayton Safey, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it felt a little out of left field to me sitting here tonight, Tom, but also, so we had the media day down at the Fiesta Bowl. We could talk to any guy we wanted. They had like 130 guys there or whatever it was. And one of the guys I wanted to talk to was Tommy Doman because of how important of a role he's going to have. So I'm kind of on the same wavelength as you there. And I did talk to him and I said, well, how would you feel about doing all three, kickoffs, place kicking, and punting? And he said he would love to do it. And that's kind of what he's going into this offseason planning on doing. He said punting is his favorite and probably his best attribute, but he can do the other two, certainly. If I had to bet on it right now, I would say it's Tommy Doman doing all three. I think it'd be the first time a Michigan guy's done it since Kenny Allen in 2016. I thought he handled it pretty well. But it's a tough thing to do, to have all that on your plate. Even when Jake Moody makes a long field goal and then he has to kick off right after, it almost feels a little weird that, in that way, but he handled it obviously so well. But that's a big loss. I was going to say wide receiver, but I'll go a little bit different and just say the second cornerback position opposite of Will Johnson, and just kind of see who's there. I mean, I know they tried to bring in a couple guys from the transfer portal there, but didn't land any. A lot of people are saying who's going to emerge there, or wondering. Miles Pollard, Jaden McBurrows, those types of guys that really haven't shown much in games, but you hear good things about behind the scenes. Someone's got to step up, or maybe they do attack the portal in the summer. So that's kind of the one I'll probably be watching the most, but I'm with you on wide receiver as well. Who's going to be that sophomore that steps up? I look back, and I'm going to write about this as well, but I look back at Michigan football history. Some of the top wide receivers, it was that sophomore season that they broke out. Look at Braylon Edwards. Anthony Carter was an exception, right, as a freshman in a lot of ways. So, wide receiver, corner, I think those are going to be really interesting position. Not necessarily battles. It will be at corner, but wide receiver, it's just kind of like, who are the guys going to be? It's going to be Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson, but you need more than that too. So it'll be really fun to watch that.
All right. Well, just to keep it well-rounded, I'm going to go with linebacker myself. And I understand that two of the three are pretty well set with Junior Colson and Michael Barrett coming back. And you're adding transfer linebacker Ernest Hausman out of Nebraska. So you kind of think, all right, well, you're set at the starting spots there, but how are you overall? How is the depth? How are you going to bring along the Jimmy Rolders and some of these other guys? And does he challenge for a starting spot? How does Junior Colson react after, he's been on the field now. He's been a leader. He's had time to really be in the mix. Does he continue to take steps up from being a very solid player for the Wolverines to being one of the real standouts at a position where I think they would have been thin? I felt like they were pretty thin last year. They couldn't have afforded to lose a whole lot. And now, what kind of depth can they build, and what kind of step up can they take in terms of their ability? Because certainly defense, given the losses of personnel, will once again maybe be more in the spotlight than the offense. You both make good points on the wide receivers, but in general, the offense will be regarded as coming back pretty darn loaded. So again, that puts defense in the spotlight. And hopefully, if you're a Michigan fan, it makes the defenders as ticked off as it made the defenders last year, because they felt like they had something to which they had to respond. So coming down the home stretch in this particular Wolverine Live, and I got to say, I have kept my spirits up despite the darkness that has surrounded professional football over the last several days. You've got the greatest of all time, not just in the NFL, but in the history of the football cosmos, and Tom Brady saying, "This is it. I'm done. I mean it this time. It's over." And that's a tough thing, because I'll tell you what, in many, many lean years of NFL watching for those of us in the state of Michigan, until one Aiden Hutchinson began the Lions revival this year, it's been Tom Brady as the banner carrier, as that guy that you just had to watch. And so gonna miss him. Clayton Safey, thoughts on number 12, calling it a day?
Yeah, I don't know the NFL without Tom Brady. I think he retired for 40 days last year, and I thought that was going to be it. But, I was glad he came back. And even though last year was a struggle for Tom Brady and the whole Bucs offense, it was kind of painful to watch at times. It was still watching Tom Brady. Like, people were like, oh, why would he come back for this? It's like he knows there's no guarantees. He came back with an opportunity, and they obviously didn't, make the most of it. And times were tough there last year. I think it was one of his few seasons that he finished under 500, but it was still watching Tom Brady. So I agree. Sundays will be a little more bleak. Hopefully the Lions are reemerging under, with Aiden Hutchinson there. But yeah, being a Lions fan my entire life, and I know I don't have it so bad because it hasn't been that long yet, but it's been made so much easier because you got, all right, well, Brady's playing at 4 or Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football, and to not have that buffer where it's Lions or bust now for me is going to be tough.
Okay, well, let's go to a guy that may have been watching the Lions since the last championship in 1957. Tom Crawford.
I was 1 year old in 1957.
There you go. What do you remember about that championship?
Yes.
Bring us home, Tom.
Yeah. Well, the amount of respect when LeBron James, I heard him the other morning talk about Tom Brady. LeBron James was looking at him in idealistic terms. Just the accolades, and it all goes down to work ethic and competitive fire that Tom Brady had, and along with all the accomplishments, obviously. And he is going to be missed, and it is a void. The Super Bowl is this Sunday. There was always, when Brady was in it, there was a Michigan element to it because you had your guy in it. That's just reality. And I go back to those 2 games in the 99 season, those comebacks. So that was in State College for that Penn State game. And then in that Orange Bowl, that comeback, he was down twice to Alabama, took Michigan back. You knew that was a foundation builder, that he was going to have a great NFL run. But yeah, what a run he had. I think this is it. And it is a void indeed. But so it's like when I watch the Super Bowl, like, okay, what Michigan players are, it's always who has the most Michigan players on that team. It is a Michigan-centric thing in the NFL for me, and that's even enhanced with the Lions with Aiden Hutchinson. They got Aiden Hutchinson. I like the Lions I'm a Lions fan. I like them even more because they got Aiden Hutchinson. So that's kind of the way I roll, and that's kind of probably the way all 3 of us roll.
And I got a big laugh in the last 24 hours as former NFL quarterback Trent Dilfer was speaking to veteran quarterbacks and saying, you guys are where it's at. I'm not impressed with Tom Brady. They as protected as the quarterbacks are these days, and I'm just not that impressed. And somebody offered up one of the, I think it had to be one of the Twitter wisdom bearers that said, word has it that Tom Brady is not all that impressed with Trent Dilfer. So,
amen to that.
Guys, it's been a blast. Thank you very much for being with us. Clayton Safey, Tom Crawford, as always. We will be talking to you guys very soon. And like I said, thanks for joining us on the Wolverine Live.